Hello, my name's Bruce Lane. I'm the Executive Director at GTI Energy. We're an Australian company that has an ISR uranium exploration project in Wyoming. And today I'd like to spend some time to tell you more about the company. So thank you for watching my presentation. So GTI is focused on finding clean fuel, being uranium, for a clean energy future. I'll let you spend some time to look at the disclaimer. And just to reiterate, GTI's story is really about taking advantage of the market opportunity for a growing demand for US domestic uranium. And I will talk about that in a bit more detail shortly. Suffice to say that this growing demand for uranium is happening at a time when the domestic supply of uranium has collapsed. And I'll show you a chart to illustrate that. So we believe that Wyoming is the place to be to produce uranium in the US. It's the US's largest energy state, or second largest energy state overall, and it is the largest uranium producer, having produced around 80% of uranium in the state. But more importantly, the deposits there are amenable to in-situ recovery mining, which is the lowest cost and lowest impact form of uranium mining. And once again, I'll talk more about that during my presentation. And the really good news here is that GTI has discovered ISR amenable uranium. So our first two drilling programs, the second of which is nearing completion, have discovered uranium mineralization that's amenable to ISR mining. And our plan is to complete the drilling at the end of this year, and then we will look to publish a resource statement in the first part of 2023. So just moving on, before I dig into the detail of the company, I want to just draw your attention to the amount of positive news for the uranium, the nuclear power and the uranium sector across the globe. Now, we, of course, are very focused on the US, but as you can see from this slide, we've got really positive news out of everywhere from Romania to the European Parliament, the UK, Germany, but as I said, more importantly, the US, where California has recently decided to keep Diablo Canyon, its last nuclear power plant, open. And we saw that as a very bellwether moment in the sector in the US. And one of the main reasons there that has occurred is because the Department of Energy has really thrown their weight behind the nuclear power sector because they understand its importance in terms of generating emissions-free energy. So a bit more news here. On another slide, we've got Mr. Gates and Mr. Buffett building a small-scale nuclear reactor in Chemera in Wyoming, which is not too far down the road from where our projects are. So there's a real understanding here from the Department of Energy now that there are a lot of retired coal-fired power stations in the US, and obviously there are around the world. They've identified 394 that are retired or nearing retirement. And essentially what they're planning to do is give them a heart transplant with a small modular reactor. So we're talking about potentially in the range of 300 megawatts, which is a lot smaller than the traditional large multi-megawatt nuclear power stations that have been built historically. So look, other news here, you can see there's a chart in the top right-hand corner that shows the number of countries building nuclear power plants. Now, that's a little out of date. There are a lot more nuclear power plants being planned, and I think easily there are plans to double the reactor fleet in the world within the next 10 to 15 years. So just to focus on uranium demand a bit more, you can see a graph there on the right-hand side that shows the massive supply gap that's been forecast. And I think there's an underrepresentation of the gap there because that doesn't include a lot of the new reactors that have been announced. And you'll see below that that there are currently 440 reactors operating in 32 countries. And there are sort of plans to build that number again, and I think that is a very conservative number. So demand is going up because the Japanese turned their reactors back on, and because of the reactor shutdowns that were planned for the most part have not occurred. And there are many, many more new reactors being planned, particularly small modular reactors. So we've got this real drive to grow a nuclear reactor fleet to meet climate objectives, but also to bring energy to a large parts of the world's population, as for example in India and China, that don't yet have electricity. So electricity growth is growing overall, and nuclear power is now seen as a very viable part of the energy mix going forward. However, the supply of uranium fuel for those reactors has been contracting, and I will talk about that more. There are many reasons for that. Partly because there's been sub-economic pricing for a long time. And what we're seeing is an improvement in the uranium price of late, which we see as being fundamental to that supply contraction reversing and further pounds being extracted from the ground. So here's a chart, a graphic which shows the 92 reactors in the US. I've touched on how important nuclear power is to the US. It's 50% of the US is clean energy, 20% of it's baseload energy. So there is no way that the US can meet its climate emissions reduction targets without nuclear power. The administration, the Department of Energy and the administration has put at least $6 billion in grants behind the nuclear power plants in the nuclear power industry, but also green tax credits. They're also looking at, or have committed to, a strategic uranium reserve to help underpin the mining and production centre. So essentially, the nuclear power business in the US is getting a reboot. It's having a moment in the emergency ward, and it's having its heart restarted. And what we'll see, we believe, is a return or an about face on this chart, which shows Kazakhstan and Russia as very significant suppliers of uranium to the US. We'll see this tiny number here up in the top right-hand corner move from, and it says 5%, but it's less than that at the moment. In reality, we'll see that start to move up, and that's what we're positioned for at GTI. This chart just illustrates that production and domestic production in the US has collapsed as a result of that sub-economic pricing. So why did we choose, within the US, why did we choose Wyoming? I touched on it before. Wyoming is a very energy-focused state. It has been a massive coal producer, oil and gas producer, and it currently has significant wind farm electricity production at the moment. Really, Wyoming really understands energy. And uranium has been mined there for many decades, but importantly, the ISR mining business was pioneered there, and it really came to commercial prominence in the 80s. And the vast majority of contemporary uranium production in Wyoming has been from in-situ recovery mining. Fraser Institute likes Wyoming. We're not the only ones. There's 7 operable facilities for ISR production there now, and 2 more licensed to build. So we think it's the heart of the uranium mining business in the US, and we believe that's where the production renaissance is going to occur. So I want to talk very briefly about in-situ recovery. Two photographs there of mines on that chart. The Hard Rock Rossing mine in Namibia, and you can see it's a very conventional open pit mine with all that goes with that. And then you've got Cameco Smith Ranch, which is the green field. Those water ponds there are nothing to do with the production process. They're just groundwater, which naturally occurs. So what we've got here is essentially a large hole in the ground, which requires lots of stripping of earth, lots of diesel, massive environmental disturbance and disruption, versus drilling a bore field in a field, which is what you see there at Cameco Smith Ranch. It is the predominant form of mining on the planet, and not only because of the low environmental impact, there's also a speed and low capex advantage, and a much lower OPEX advantage. So it's a lower cost, lower impact form of mining, and it's very benign to the environment we're using in Wyoming. Typically, not in every case, but typically, it's an alkaline lixiviant or leach solution, which is used to pump into the ore zone and liberate the ore, and then it's extracted, and then the uranium pregnant liquor that comes out of the ground is then run over an ion exchange tower where resin beads attract the uranium. They're taken, often precipitated and dried, and the water stream is then treated and returned back to the water in clean form to meet the standards required for the permitting. So it's a very low impact form and a very good way to mine. So in Wyoming, there are two major producing basins, one at the Powder River Basin, and you can see in this the smaller map that there's sort of two sections to the Powder River Basin, and then there's the Great Divide Basin where our projects are. Now, these basins are richly mineralized with ISR amenable sandstone deposits and active producers. There's a lot of historical production and historical exploration here. So on the larger map, you can see that our projects have got the blue borders around them. You can see Thor, Wicket, Odin, Wicket East, Loki. Those are all our projects. And then further up, the red bordered project is our Green Mountain project. So next door to Green Mountain, you've got Rio Tinto's project portfolio there, and you've also got Sheep Mountain with a very significant project there, which is owned by Energy Fuels. But our focus of late has been our immediate focus this year has been at the Thor project further down, which is very close, within 12 miles of the Lost Creek ISR plant there, which is owned by URANIUM. And so really what we're looking for is a deposit that is somewhat analogous to URANIUM's deposit. They claim that production plant to be the lowest cost ISR production plant outside of Kazakhstan. And so what we've found so far is mineralization that it appears to be somewhat analogous to URANIUM's deposit. And I think I've covered many of the points already on the slide, except that part of our choosing of the projects was because we had some historical drilling information from some old Kerr-McGee drill maps, and not only are the deposits in the projects, our projects close to the likes of Energy Fuels, URANIUM, Rio Tinto, and now UEC, but we also had drill information which gave us a good understanding that the projects were staked on the reduction oxidation boundary trends. So the drilling conducted by Kerr-McGee back in the 70s and 80s has been very, very helpful in guiding our drilling. So the other thing reason we chose the projects is they came with some people who have very deep experience of uranium exploration and production in Wyoming, and Doug and Jim are a key part of our team. And as you can see there, Doug with 45 years in both exploration and engineering, and project development and reclamation in the area, and Jim with over 30 years experience in the exploration side. So the projects came with people who have a very deep understanding of the area and an ability to help us execute on the projects. So our first drilling campaign at our Thor project was very successful, and from that program we were able to find mineralization that was below the water table, at least 50 feet below the water table. We were sort of around 100 feet, and then down the mineralization sort of down to 400 or 500 feet. So that's really optimum depth, and the widths that we discovered were good, with good thicknesses and good grade, which is what we're looking for to be able to conduct an in-situ recovery mining operation. So that was encouraging for us. So we decided to follow that up with another drill campaign this year. There's 100,000 or around about 100,000 feet being drilled as we speak in the Great Divide Basin. We've completed the first part of the program, which was down at Thor. And once again, we got some really good results there. The rigs, which I'll talk about in a minute, the rigs have now moved up to the Odin Tebow area, and I think we'll be soon moving on to the Wicket East area. So we're doing our best to get that finished by Christmas. The weather's a factor. If we can't get it finished by Christmas, then we'll probably complete it early in the new year. I think we may even have 3 rigs operating there now. So look, I thought it'd be helpful to show an image of where we're drilling at Thor. This is all on Bureau of Land Management, or BLM land. We don't have landholders to deal with. It's very open, it's very flat, very accessible, and we've got the Lost Creek production plant, which is sort of about 10 or 12 miles directly to the west from here. So it's about as good as you can hope for exploration in terms of access and ease of moving forward. That's not to say there aren't permitting requirements and all those things, but it is a very good place for us to be exploring and then hopefully developing a project. So this Thor program that we've just completed, 70 holes, we now have almost 5 miles of roll front of mineralized trend. There's at least three host sand units that we've identified. And look, we had some very good grade thickness results here. And in particular, I want to draw your attention to our success at section 29, where we got our best hole with a grade thickness of 2.55. And that's bearing in mind that the target cutoff grade thickness is 0.02. So this is a really outstanding result here at the right location vis-a-vis the water table. And what's exciting here is the area that I've marked with a red circle was an area that we previously had no results for. We didn't have historical drilling information there, but our interpretation of the geology and Doug's kind of an understanding of how the roll fronts work in this area led us to put a fence line of holes along the bottom of section 29. And when we did that, we picked up mineralization, and we then able to drill that and follow that. We believe the trend will run to the north, and we have a section above that. So we're talking about 1.5 miles of trend there, a new additional trend, and at the grades and thicknesses that are on the chart there, which are stellar, really, and very exciting for us. We've got some great results. We're heading towards an initial or a maiden resource definition, an NI 43-101 and JORC compliant resource statement in the first quarter of next year. So we're in this first section, which is to define and drill the resource. And from that process, we would expect to be able to prepare a preliminary economic assessment or pre-feasibility study before moving into phase 2. And so next year, it'll be our maiden resource statement. There will be further drilling conducted beyond that, but ultimately we're heading towards preparing our feasibility study for the build and mining of a resource. That's our plan. So just to finish off by summarising our corporate situation, we've got a market capitalisation of around Australian 20 million, so it's sort of US 15 to 20 million. At the end of the last quarter, we had cash on hand of 5.4 million Australian dollars. And just to, I guess, finish off on what our evolution has been, and more particularly what we've got to look forward to from here. I think, as I've explained, we're in the process of completing the drilling program in the Great Divide, which we hope to have finished by Christmas or early in the new year. We're also doing an exploration targeting review at Green Mountain, and some sort of primary targeting work there, which will then yield a plan for drilling and a permitting path so that we can get drilling next year. So we're working on that. As I said, the resource report in perhaps towards the end of quarter 1 next year. And then we would look to be drilling again in the summer in 2023. So thanks very much for taking the time to hear more about GTI. And please, of course, reach out to me on those numbers or that email address. And if you've got any further questions or would like to discuss the company further. Thank you for your time.